All right. So we have been covering the Abrego Garcia case. And this is exactly why, for anyone who thinks, oh, good, they're getting them out of the country. Yo, man, if Trump can do this to Abrego Garcia, he can do it to any of us. I will go on the record right here. They're going to eventually arrest an American citizen on the premise of terrorism or support for terrorism and try to subvert constitutional protections on those grounds using the Patriot Act. I am going on the record right now predicting that. In 2019, a judge ordered he couldn't be deported, and DNS didn't appeal the order. For the next 6 years, he lived quietly with his wife and children in Maryland, and the court notes complied fully with all directives from ICE, including annual check ins, and has never been charged with or convicted of any crime, concluding there were no legal grounds whatsoever for his arrest, detention, or removal. Now, that's something even the administration admits, even as they fight to keep this man in hell. Now, here's a little video to give you an idea of where he is. A photojournalist actually accompanied one of the unfortunate plane loads of people headed to this hell in El Salvador.
Event was, top secret. Nobody knew it was coming. But because I'm already embedded, I was invited to come along, but I didn't expect what I saw when I saw them. My name is Philip Holsinger. I'm a photojournalist and a writer. I wrote this. They entered their cold cells, 80 men per cell, with steel planks for bunks, no mats, no sheets, no pillow, no television, no books, no talking, no phone calls, and no visitors. For these Venezuelans, it was not just a prison they had arrived at, it was exile to another world, a place so cold and far from home, they may as well have been sent into space. Nameless and forgotten, holding my camera, it was as if I watched them become ghosts. The reason that sort of came out of me is that the working title for my story on this, my big story, is called A Photographer of Ghosts. And it's got, sort of a double meaning, and that is when you photograph pain, it's like you're, photographing something invisible. And even though I don't think they're being disappeared, that's what it felt like. It felt like, holy crap, even if they're wicked people, the chance that maybe one of them is innocent and there's no way anybody can talk to them was like seeing people become ghosts.
Okay, well, according to research that's been done now, seems like it's a lot more than one of them that's innocent. 90% of migrants sent to Salvador lacked U.S. criminal record. They also did a more extended study and found 75% of them have no criminal record, not in their home countries, not in the U.S. So most of these people have not committed any crime other than to enter the country illegally. Now, why the punishment for that would go beyond just deporting you back to your home country? That's a very good question. Even if you believe these people need to be rounded up and deported, why would you do this to them? For what reason? So this scumbag at End Wokeness puts out the bullshit. Judge Paul Azinis orders Trump to return a suspected MS-13 member from an El Salvadoran jail. It was pretty well established in his case that he was not an MS-13 member. That's why he was allowed to stay in the first place. But he repeats that. Now, Bukele, the leader of El Salvador, thought this was hilarious. That an innocent man was in this hellish prison that he had devised, tweeted this out. And you know who else thought that was hilarious? Elon Musk thought that was hilarious. Now, I just want to say, for anyone who still thinks Elon is a fucking hero or Donald Trump is a fucking hero, people who would do this to somebody that they know was just some poor schmuck living his life, living with his family. They certainly know he wasn't an MS-13 member. If they would do that to him, there's nothing they wouldn't do to you. That shows such a lack of humanity. There's been research done on this. The more wealth you have, the more psychopathic tendencies and the less human empathy these people display. When you're talking about people who are that rich, you're like an insect to them.
Right.
What if you accidentally get hurt by the system? Yeah, okay, you probably won't end up in CCOT. What makes you think they care if their economic policies wipe out millions of people financially, wipe out hundreds of thousands of small business people? You think they care about that? They only care what happens to them. If you could find something like this funny, how sick is that? This is who's leading us.
Yep.
So moving along. So this is what Trump had to say about bringing this poor man back. He, as you might predict,
El Salvador, they've done an incredible job, but we've been fortunately winning those cases. But we have judges that are out of control that say, "Oh, bring them back, bring them back. We don't want them back. We don't want them back." Can you imagine? You spend all of that time, energy, and money on getting them out, and then you have a judge that sits there, a local judge who sits there, federal judges sit there and says, "No, bring them back." One was brought back, or they want to bring him back because he wasn't a member of Tren de Aragua. He was a member of MS-13, which is just as bad. So they misidentified him, but it sounds to me like he was a member of MS-13, so they want him brought back because he wasn't treated properly. It's we got to be smart. Our country's got to get a lot smarter than it is, but...
Okay. That's a lie. That's a lie. The mistake wasn't that they mistook him for Tren de Agua. That's a lie. The mistake is that he was in MS-13 at all. At all. So the Supreme Court sides with his attorneys and says that they have to facilitate him being brought back, which is kind of tricky wording. The Supreme Court on Thursday instructed the government to take steps to return a Salvadoran migrant it had wrongly deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador. In an unsigned order, the court stopped short of ordering the return of the migrant, Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, indicating the courts may not have the power to require the executive branch to do so. But the court endorsed part of a trial judge's order that had required the government to facilitate and effectuate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia. Quote, the order properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador, the Supreme Court's ruling said. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. In her statement on Thursday, Justice Sotomayor wrote that it would be shameful to leave Abrego Garcia, a husband and father without a criminal record, in a Salvadoran prison for no reason recognized by the law. She added that the government's position implies that it could deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. Exactly. If they can do this to him, and under the premise that, well, courts don't have authority to get involved in United States foreign policy decisions, which they're trying to slide this under by deporting these people to an outside country, what makes you think they can't use that argument on American citizens?
Of course.
Well, now he's in El Salvador. We can't get him back. He's in another country. This is the court is exceeding its reach by getting involved in our relationship with another country. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of doing it this way. Why are they sending them there? To get away from all legal constraints.
Yep.
So after this was thrown back to the lower court, of course, they demanded a plan for facilitating the return, which they violated. The Trump administration said it would not provide information on how it will get a wrongly deported Maryland dad home by a Friday morning deadline because the time frame a judge imposed was, quote, impracticable. In effect, the Department of Justice is openly defying a court order that requires it to provide details about 29-year-old Kilmar Abrego Garcia's whereabouts and how he will be brought back stateside. Abrego Garcia was flown to a mega prison in El Salvador last month due to an administrative error. Despite the DOJ admitting its mistake, it argued it did not have the authority to bring Abrego Garcia home because he was now in the custody of El Salvador. Yeah, man, Bukele, man, he's really going to flex that muscle. He's really going to flex that muscle. Tell us, no, the check has already been cashed. You can't have him. Maryland District Court. I mean, it's such an absurd argument. Maryland District Court Judge Paula Zinnes, an appointee of former President Barack Obama, disagreed and ruled that Abrego Garcia must be returned stateside, where he has an American wife and child and was working legally as a sheet metal apprentice prior to being taken into custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement during what he believed to be a routine traffic stop. Abrego Garcia came to the U.S. at 16 because a rival gang of MS-13 had been extorting and threatening his family over their pupusa business in San Salvador, he claimed in court while pursuing an asylum case. Abrego Garcia claimed gang members had pressured him to join them, but he refused, so he came to America to avoid violent repercussions. He filed for asylum in 2019, but was denied because a judge said his application came too long after he entered the country illegally. Still, an immigration judge ruled that Abrego Garcia could not be deported to El Salvador because he may be persecuted there. His loved ones cited that ruling in a lawsuit against the federal government and Department of Homeland Security Secretary and infamous dog killer, Kristi Noem, demanding he be returned to the U.S. from his home country. So you want to see what a union leader who doesn't have Trump's dick all the way down his throat like O'Brien looks like? You want to see what a real union leader looks like? This is what that looks like.
We need to make our voices heard. We're not red, we're not blue. We're the building trades, the backbone of America. We built a $5 billion, you want to build a $5 billion data center? Want more six-figure careers with healthcare retirement and no college debt? You don't call Elon Musk, you call us. North America's building trades unions. And yeah, that means all of us, including our brother, smart apprentice, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who we demand to be returned to us and his family now. Bring him home.
Where's O'Brien? Too busy kissing up to the boss, right? So they're setting a very dangerous precedent, and they're really telegraphing it by the wording they're using. They're getting ready to make the argument that El Salvador has legal jurisdiction over this prisoner and they're powerless to return him. I mean, they were foreshadowing that before, but now they're stating it pretty explicitly. So finally, they acceded to the court order to give a report on his well-being, and they slipped that language into the report that they gave. It is my understanding, based on official reporting from our embassy in San Salvador, that Abrego Garcia is currently being held in the Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador. He is alive and secure in that facility. He is detained pursuant to the sovereign domestic authority of El Salvador. Blah, blah, blah. Trump, looking forward to seeing President Bukele of El Salvador on Monday. Our nations are working closely together to eradicate terrorist organizations and build a future of prosperity. President Bukele has graciously accepted into his nation's custody some of the most violent alien enemies of the world, and in particular the United States. Once again, 90% of these people have not been accused of any crime in the US. 75% have not been accused of a crime anywhere.
That's right.
These barbarians are now in the sole custody of El Salvador, a proud and sovereign nation, and their future is up to President B and his government. They will never threaten or menace our citizens again. Okay, so there's obviously he didn't write this. That is a very lawyerly thing to insert in there. They are laying down the legal argument that they are going to use to not bring him back. Again, how sick do you have to be to fight like this over what you admit was an administrative error? You
Exactly.
admit this guy should never have been sent. What kind of a sick piece of garbage would argue this hard to keep this guy there? This is this poor man's wife.
Husband Kilmer was abducted and disappeared by the Trump administration. It's been 28 days since I lost on my husband. This so-called administration error has destroyed my family's happiness, my children's innocence. Kilmer, if you can hear me, I'm still fighting for you.
Just absolutely horrible situation. And it is already a pretty good example of Curtis Yarvin's playbook. This is he's a blogger who's a big influence on particularly Vance. And his playbook, forget about Project 2025. I mean, yeah, they've definitely incorporated ideas from that. Curtis Yarvin's playbook is go in and flood the zone and force them to keep suing and just take up bandwidth and just defy the court orders. Now, so far, they're not just saying, screw you. They're pretending to go through a legal process, but they didn't accede to that court's orders to facilitate his return. And they're setting this premise that, hey, it's out of our hands, which of course is absolutely ridiculous. And again, all the legal maneuvering aside, if you feel like it is not dangerous to you personally that they're doing this to this person, I would beg you to reconsider that and admit if it is 100% true that if they can do that to him, they can do that to you. As Sonia Sotomayor said in her decision, yeah, man, what's to stop them from putting an American citizen in a third-party country and saying it's out of our hands?
Right.
You can
They
use
could
the
just
same argument on anybody.
Of course. And, I just have to ask once again, what is the benefit to the average person, to people who voted for this? What is the benefit of doing this? It's just completely sick. It's completely monstrous. And the fact that you have to have your arm twisted to try and rectify this just shows you what absolute low character these people have. Why would you even need to be told by a judge that you have to fix this mistake?
Right,
As soon as you
right.
admitted it was a mistake, you'd think you'd be
Right.
trying to undo it. But no, instead we'll just make up a lie about him. Hey, now they say he's MS-13, not Tren de Aragua. Again, just a complete and total lie. A complete and total fabrication. And look, this is why I was against mass deportations from day one. It was very obvious that this is what this was going to be. The immigration issue was something that was really just not talked about during the campaign because the Democrats completely ceded the issue to Trump. But it was very obvious.
Kamala ran an ad with the wall in it.
With the wall in it, yeah. I mean, but so it was very obvious that this is where they were going to take it. I'm not surprised by this in the slightest. I'm a little surprised by El Salvador being the housing facility. This was sort of the people are comparing this to Guantanamo Bay. This is actually worse than Guantanamo Bay. Because Guantanamo Bay is sort of this extra legal black site, kind of an outpost where you could make the argument, hey, once we park you there, we could still get you back because it's ours. This is not ours. This is, okay, we're going to buy off one of these strongmen in one of these South American countries to basically just keep them there. And this way we have an extra obstacle that is just inconveniently, quote unquote, in our way when we have to rectify a mistake. Well, that's not up to us. That's up to him, which is, of course, as you said, completely absurd. Of course, we can get them back if we wanted them back.
What control do we have over our vassal state?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So we will continue to be on this, but yeah, it's a really horrible case.
This poor man.
Yep. It's a really horrible case, which is why you just have to be opposed to these mass deportations in general, to me, from day one. I mean,
They look, when you are an oligarchic class, and you need to keep the people from coming for you, you have to distort their perception of reality, and you have to attribute their miserable condition to everything but the greed of your class. Everything. And the outsider, the immigrant, the racially different, the culturally different, the religiously different, that's always the first target for these people. I promise you, these people are not the reason your life sucks.
No, they certainly are not.
Please clap.